Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Suburban Rifleman. Today, I've got my Belgian Franken rifle here. And I just want to talk about this a little bit before we start shooting. I'll probably make this into two videos because it seems like if I talk too much at the beginning of a shooting video, when I look at my video analytics, the viewership drops off quickly. So for those of you who are interested in what this rifle is, I'll make one video and then we'll switch over to doing some shooting. So this rifle is really a child of the great panic of 2020, when all of the mandates and restrictions and everything went into effect, and we couldn't really, didn't have a lot of freedom of movement, and we were kind of sequestered. I took the opportunity to do some projects. I did some projects around the house, and I also started cleaning out the gun cave, and I was digging around in all of my parts, which I had laying around, and a light bulb came on in my head that there was probably somewhere in this pile of junk a complete rifle. And here it is. This is a Belgian Mauser of some sort of 1950 model. I'm not sure. Because this was basically just a barreled action when I got it, and it was already heavily messed with. So I'd like to assure you that no pristine military collectibles were harmed in the making of this rifle or in the making of this video. I had this barreled action. It's in 30-06. It has a 20-inch barrel. It may have started off as a 20-inch barrel. It might have been a 20-inch carbine. I don't see any indication of a front sight ever having been on this barrel, though. So I think perhaps it may be a rifle barrel that was cut back, but I'm not entirely sure about that. And it basically had no crown. So I had to re-crown the barrel myself. When I first took this barreled action in trade, I was thinking perhaps I would unscrew the barrel and put in a new Criterion barrel or something in 308, but I was kind of locked down. The supply chain was wrecked. I wasn't going to really be able to buy much of anything. And the fact is, these FN 30-06 barrels are really good. As a matter of fact, they sold surplus brand new FN 30-06 barrels, and people were using them to rebarrel their Mausers. So it's actually a pretty good barrel, and we're going to see, ultimately how it shoots. The bore looks pretty good. Generally, I don't think these Belgian Mausers got used very hard. The FN 49 was already in service. I think these were mostly used for training and sort of rear line work. So, and the bore looks good. So I haven't done a chamber cast or anything like that, but it seems like a pretty good barrel. So unfortunately, it had already been drilled and tapped for scope rings, and the front holes were just fine. The rear holes were all messed up, and it was meant for Weaver two-piece bases. The rear base was, like, as I said, all screwed up. The front base was fine. I didn't want to weld up these holes and drill and tap new ones, so I tried modifying a aluminum rear Weaver base. That didn't really work out too well. I wasn't able to achieve anything with that. So then I thought, well, what about if I got a Weaver one-piece steel Grand Slam mount, which is what's on here. These use the same two front holes that you would have in the front base for a two-piece aluminum base, but there's only one hole in the rear, and I took the chance that that hole wasn't going to line up with either of the poorly drilled and tapped holes, and as it turns out, it didn't. So I was able to drill and tap a brand new fresh hole in the rear here and get this mounted. I started off with low steel Weaver rings on this base, but unfortunately, whoever modified this rifle initially, they did a hell of a terrible job on the bolt handle. And I don't want to spend a lot of money to replace this bolt handle, unless maybe it turns out that the rifle's a really great shooter. And in which case maybe I will go ahead and invest the money in a better bolt handle. I started off with low rings. The bolt handle wouldn't clear the ocular bell on the scope I was trying to use. I moved up to medium rings, still wouldn't clear. I moved up to these high rings, which are in here now, and it would open and cycle, but the bolt handle was dragging on the side of the ocular bell. So I thought, well, what am I going to do now? So I started shopping around for a scope that would have a smaller diameter ocular bell. This is a Hawk Vantage 4x35, I believe. I'm not sure, 4x32 or 4x35. It's got a mil dot reticle in it for ranging purposes. I wanted a fixed power, relatively low magnification scope, and this Hawk fit the bill. Now, I have no experience with Hawk scopes. The Hawk Vantage is generally classified as being very similar to Vortex Crossfire or Nikon Pro Staffs or Bushnell Banners. So it's supposed to be a fairly good scope. They say that it's recoil rated for all cartridges. And it has a lifetime warranty. So it's not quite as good as, say, Vortex's no questions asked lifetime warranty. You run your scope over with your truck and they'll replace it for free. The Hawk lifetime warranty is only against defects in manufacture, and it's only for the original purchaser. But I don't have any. I bought this scope new, and I don't have any intention of selling it. So, and I also don't have any intention of running it over with my truck. But, who knows? So I did that. So another major component I had laying around was this stock. This is a Boyd stock. I got it several years ago when this particular model was first introduced. I got it to review. And I got it to put on a different rifle than this, but I got it to review when I was a staff writer for GunNews.com, before GunNews.com went belly up. But the stock was designed for a standard large ring Model 98 Mauser. And these FN manufactured Belgian 30-06 Mausers are very similar, but they're not exactly the same. There are some significant dimensional differences. So I had to do some inletting, and then I had to do a bunch of bedding. And I did the bedding in small batches over the course of several weeks. I didn't want to get an Acroglass kit, so I just used JB Weld. I used the slowest curing JB Weld I could find, and I used butcher's wax as a release agent. So the action is not fully bedded, but it is contact point bedded, and it fits in the stock very, very tightly now, and the barrel is free floated. The last thing I had laying around was this trigger, and you're probably not going to be familiar with this brand of trigger. This is a Thor trigger. They're made in South Africa. I actually bought this in South Africa to put on the Mauser that I had taken there to hunt. A friend of mine who lives in South Africa is a pretty talented gunsmith, and he sells these triggers. It's essentially a Timney clone, whereas the Timney has an aluminum body, the Thor has a steel body, but otherwise, functionally, it's exactly the same. And when he installed it, my gunsmith buddy adjusted the trigger to a nice, clean 3-pound break. So not a target rifle trigger, but a good hunting trigger. So I think that pretty much covers it. The only thing I really spent money on, well, I spent money on all of this stuff, ultimately, but most of it was just laying around. Oh, and I have a Mark II low-profile safety in the rear here. This actually was on this barreled action when I got the barreled action, but it had been fitted incorrectly. They had ground the hell out of the cocking piece here, and luckily I have spare Model 98 parts laying around, so I had a fresh cocking piece, and I refit this correctly, and it works correctly. So I think that pretty much does it for a description of the rifle itself. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up, and we'll make a second one where we go ahead and shoot it. And when I post that, I hope to see each of you here then. Later, guys.